Hi, Neha.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining. We're slowly getting more and more viewers, so we'll wait a couple minutes. But are you you're at home right now? I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us. We're really excited. We've been doing just a little background on us. We are a podcast, as I mentioned when we spoke earlier. And because my co-host and I, Navi, we can't meet, we decided to do this like COVID Chronicles, where we talk to different people from different professions about their experiences in their careers with COVID and the effects of COVID. And so, we obviously wanted to bring you on because we've been reading that there's a vast increase in the cases of domestic violence now because people are staying at home. But maybe we can just start with you telling us a little bit about Apna Ghar and what work you do for them.
Sure. I'm Apna Ghar's executive director, and I've actually been with the organization for 17 years.
Wow.
I'm in my almost 7th year as the executive director. And our organization is about 30 years old, and we've been working on issues of domestic violence and other forms of gender-based violence, so kind of looking at all of it from a gender perspective. For all of this time, we started out with a 24-hour crisis line, which we still have, but we also have emergency housing. We have a safe home or shelter. We also have several transitional housing apartments, so people can go from the shelter to these transitional housing apartments. They can stay there for up to 2 years.
Wow.
And Apna Ghar pays the rent and the utilities, and they can use that time to save money and kind of get employment and sort of get back on their feet.
Right.
And then we also provide counseling, and so we do that for children and adults. And
Okay.
We have a medical advocacy program, so we have a partnership with Swedish Hospital, and we also do work with other kind of hospitals in the medical field. The idea is to ensure access to healthcare, access to justice for these survivors. We also have a legal advocacy program. We partner with CVLS to provide a family law clinic, but we also work with a lot of our legal aid and pro bono partners to ensure kind of access to justice around the domestic violence piece. And family law, but also because we primarily serve immigrant refugees,
Right.
To ensure kind of like the immigration piece as well, because that's so very important.
Right.
So it's a kind of comprehensive suite of services. Our agency specializes in providing culturally competent services, so we make sure that we can. It's about sort of being able to communicate in the language, but it's also really about kind of understanding the barriers that someone who's new to this country but is also experiencing violence and trauma, kind of how that impacts their life, and how we can help access all of these resources that they might need to kind of move forward.
That makes sense. And that actually goes right into our next question, which was, what are the primary demographics of people who use Apna Ghar services? And is it local to Chicago, or do you guys expand outside of Chicago as well?
We have recently expanded outside of Chicago. We do have a location in Skokie, and then in Chicago, we have been for all of these years primarily serving the north side. So kind of Uptown and Albany Park and the kind of Devon, Westridge area, Edgewater, all of those neighborhoods. But we recently also expanded to the south side. So we're kind of trying to serve the city and all of the surrounding suburbs as much as we can in terms of having physical locations in those areas. But we've served people from everywhere. Like if they need our services and we can find a way to get to them, or they can find a way to get to us, then we're available to them.
That makes sense. And in terms of, who these people are you finding that most of the majority are immigrants? Are they, local to Chicago? Where are these, the people coming from?
So it's a little bit of both. I mean, our sort of niche is in serving newly arrived immigrants. So kind of people who might still need that immigration support, need support into just kind of understanding and navigating like just the new everything new that they're experiencing from
Sure.
having just come, and then like I said, on top of that, having the experience of violence and trauma. So that's sort of our like area where we specialize with newly arrived immigrants and refugees. But we certainly serve people who've been here for a while, so second generation. Certainly anybody who is also just quote unquote American,
Sure.
because we have a supervised visitation program. We have just so many different programs that could be helpful to people from kind of different backgrounds. But
Right.
but I do want to point out that that doesn't necessarily say anything about the prevalence of domestic violence and gender-based violence in those communities. It's just who we are and who we're sort of designed to serve. But there's several other agencies, because unfortunately it's an issue that cuts across all communities,
Right.
And all socioeconomic backgrounds. So there's other agencies that are more specialized in serving different populations. But this is just, it's based on like sort of how our programs are designed, because those were the communities that were not being served. So we specialize in serving underserved and marginalized communities.
Okay. And just so we have a little more clarity for our viewers, can you describe, because you keep saying gender-based violence, and I think colloquially we say domestic violence, right? And so I think we want to understand the terminology here as well. Could you define gender-based violence?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we certainly domestic violence is probably the biggest piece around gender-based violence, but we also serve people who've experienced sexual violence, sexual assault, people who've been trafficked into also kind of like labor situations where they might be exploited. We serve people who have experienced different forms of this violence, such as like, you know, people hear about like honor killings and FGM, things like that. So if it falls under that kind of umbrella, we're able to serve them. But domestic violence and family violence is the biggest piece. And family violence, because a lot of the communities that we serve also may live, for example, in multi-generational homes, there may be multiple abusers. There may be people who, you know, multiple people who are being abused. So it could be children, could be an adult parent, and it could be even sort of somebody who's considered a senior or an elder that might be experiencing the violence as well.
That makes sense. And then in terms of the work that you guys are doing, what are some trends that you've noticed in the current climate?
I think one of the things that we're most worried about is the frequency and the severity of the violence. So I think it's important to note that there are a lot of stressors, but if someone wasn't violent before, they're not going to become violent because of kind of this pandemic or this additional health crisis.
Sure.
I think what happens is if someone already was violent, whether it's physically or emotionally or psychologically, they're just going to be able to do it more because you're in the house together all of the time.
Yeah.
And also the severity of it. So it could progress, for example, from being emotional and psychological to physical, or if it was already physical, it could become much more physical. So I think that's the primary concern. And the other issue is that a lot of survivors do have great sort of coping skills. So they're able to kind of, under normal quote unquote circumstances, they're able to go to work or have activities for the children and find ways to kind of avoid the violence in that situation. And they're not really able to do that now because they may not be able to go to work or they have to work from home. And so everyone's sort of in this kind of confined space all of the time.
Right.
And so that's really a concern. But then additionally, all of the stressors. So if people are losing employment, then it's all of those things are kind of adding up to kind of create a really bad situation, which a situation that was already bad is just becoming worse, much more difficult.
Right, that makes sense. And in terms of South Asians in this world, what are some trends that you're seeing when it comes to gender violence within the South Asian community?
So I think one thing that we're concerned about is that that Westridge area is one of the hardest hit areas related to COVID-19. And again, a lot of that has to do with multi-generational families, people living together in smaller or cramped quarters, just because, they may have arrived newly as immigrants and everybody's
Sure.
kind of contributing to the family income, things like that. So that's been concerning around this crisis. And then just kind of trying to make sure that they do have the information that they need, and then the information in the languages and in the ways that they're comfortable kind of getting it. So I know that like the city and the state and everybody's making a really concerted effort, but we're also working with them to ensure that that information goes out in the right languages and kind of goes out in the ways that it's accessible to people and that
Makes
they
sense.
can understand it easier.
Yeah, and and it's interesting that you say that they're in close, cramped quarters and with shelter at home in play. How does somebody like that reach out to Apna Ghar or just reach out for help?
Yeah, I know that that's really difficult for at this time. So Apna Ghar, we've got a 24-hour crisis line. So if people can call, we're available 24/7. But we've also made a text option available. There's ways to email us. We certainly Apna Ghar is across sort of social media platforms, and so we will get kind of messages through social media as well. So we're trying to be as available as possible so they can reach out. There's also some kind of options through the city, like there's Smart 911, so you could actually kind of register with 911 just to alert them that there's an issue in your house, and so when you call, they know to kind of prioritize that response, and they'll know what they're kind of going into, because sometimes law enforcement doesn't know what they're walking into.
Interesting.
There's 311. There's ways that people can reach out, and one of the things we're trying to do is to make sure that they know that we are available. The other thing that Apna Ghar has done is we've created resources just related to COVID-19 and put that on our website. We also do have a newsletter that goes out to our current program participants. But if someone new just happened to go on our website, all of the resources are listed there. And so, it's everything from what they might need to know about homeschooling, but also certainly about their experience of violence. So there's, I think there are mental health hotlines. So I think our city and state, fortunately, and the county, Cook County, and I'm sure the surrounding counties as well, have really come together and have really understood that this is a problem that's being exacerbated by this crisis, and that we all need to kind of respond. So the resources are available, but I do recognize that it's difficult. So we're seeing an increase in text messages, but somewhat of a decrease in phone calls.
Oh, interesting. Right. And that makes sense, right? Because if you're on the phone, you can be heard in the house and all of that. So then when someone does reach out, what are the steps that Apna Ghar takes to, moving forward?
So typically we do an assessment, so just to kind of understand what's happening and how we can help. And so a lot of it is also safety planning. So to make sure, for example, if they did make the decision to leave, which again is not something that we necessarily ask them to do, but if somebody has decided to leave, then we want to make sure that it can be done safely. Because one of the dynamics of domestic violence that I think people don't fully understand is that it's most dangerous when somebody has decided to leave. So that is the time when someone who is abusing someone else feels the most loss of power and control. And ultimately, this is about power and control. So that's when we see the occurrence of very severe violence or even domestic violence related homicide. So it's very, very important that we do this safety planning, and our goal is always to just work with the survivors in the way that they want. So we don't, again, prescribe anything. We work with what they think they want to do next, and then we kind of obviously help them problem solve around it. So if somebody wanted to leave, then the city again and the state have come together to provide safe hotel options. So we can arrange transportation. Lyft is providing codes. So we can arrange transportation to the hotel. We can ensure that they have groceries and all of the things that they need. We can ensure that they can leave with the children, because again, like, we can provide the legal support, and then we can provide kind of all of the support that they need after that, related to, like I said, just basic things like food and household items, but
Right.
also counseling and helping with kind of whatever their long-term goals might be,
Right.
and then whatever next level of housing they might need.
Right, that makes sense. And then with your current, clients that Apna Ghar was currently working with prior to COVID, obviously when there's counseling involved, now it's all, virtual. So how are you guys dealing with that? Are you sensing, that some clients maybe don't want to do it, or, what's the trend that you're noticing there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that happened is that they had to kind of, I think, like, if we were doing counseling with them, it might have turned more into addressing something like immediate. So they may have been kind of making progress around kind of healing, and then now they've just been sort of hit with something else.
Yeah.
And so they just have more immediate needs. So it may be that they lost employment and they kind of need to start thinking about those things, or they're feeling additional stress of having children at home all the time and having the responsibility of single parenting and being the primary caregiver and supporting their kids as well.
Sure.
So I think people are connecting with us for sure. They may not be able to kind of do counseling in the way that they might have done before, or they might feel like there are some setbacks just because of having to deal with kind of what's happening around them. A lot of people have expressed anxiety around, like, the health issues, like, how do I avoid getting the virus? What is this?
Yeah.
And, like, why was there a stay-at-home order? What, how, all of the things that we're all experiencing, they're also experiencing in addition to the other issues. So a lot of our conversations is now about just kind of all of our, new normal, or whatever this might be.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine, like, if you've got, you've already got issues that you're dealing with before, and now this on top of it. I mean, a lot of us are affected very severely. So, thank you so much for what you're doing. And we actually have a viewer here saying thank you for this important conversation. So, it is appreciated. And I think it's important that people know what Apna Ghar does, because, there are people who want to help. And some of us just don't know how, sitting in our house, how we can help. So what is a way that people can help Apna Ghar sitting at home, or, whether it's services or financially or whatever, what is something that we can do to help?
Yeah, we actually have a campaign going on right now, because a lot of we actually kind of pivoted and shifted our work too. In the past, Apna Ghar has provided food and things like that, but not in the way that we've needed to recently. So we're really providing a lot of, like, kind of household items, but again, because of the current issue, a lot of the way that we're doing it is through gift cards, and kind of making sure that, like, we're trying to work with grocery stores that might create, like, a voucher system, so that, like, our participants can just go there and give, say, Apna Ghar as the code, so that they could get some, do shopping, or get a, like, discount or free stuff. So we've had to kind of adapt to. Normally, we've had people, who'd come drop off things that they've purchased, and then we can distribute it. But all of that's been difficult for us to do.
Sure.
We've done some, like, sort of mask distribution, but we've also, and food and things like that, but also, like, mailing things to our program participants. So it's like any amount, but, like, just our fundraising and sort of money seems to be the easiest way to kind of have people contribute and support. But we're also making sure that our newsletter and information about what we're doing is getting out to our supporters, so they understand where like, their contributions are going and how they're truly helping. But we've really had to kind of pivot and shift to kind of providing things that to more people. Look, we provided them, for example, in our shelter or safe home, but not had to do it with other participants who had employment. But now, because so many people are losing employment, we've had to kind of do it for more people. And because, like I said, we serve immigrants and refugees, they're not usually eligible for public benefits. So
Right.
it's our support that's kind of keeping them
That's
going.
okay. And what about non-financial ways? Is there something that we can do to help, Apna Ghar?
I think like there's some professional support that potentially attorneys could provide. If some of our participants needed like legal advice, because that would be something that we could connect people to even virtually. I mean, there's just a lot of things like I think support around technology, because I think like we've had to help people get, for example, laptops. We found that a lot of our program participants had smartphones, but not laptops and things like that. So when children had to start doing e-learning, there wasn't like the right equipment for it. So trying to get that equipment to them. But then the other thing that kind of came out of that is like they may not know how to use it. So kind of connecting someone like a volunteer to kind of, help them connect, navigate, and kind of understand how to use it and support their kids. Those are all ways that potentially people could help.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think the other thing is, based on your experience, what are some signs that could help us recognize calls for help from our family and our friends, especially right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of people might experience anxiety and even depression. So to kind of not think about it only as a result of the pandemic, but it could be something that's been, that existed that is now being kind of made worse. And so I think just being a safe person for someone to talk to, because there's also so much stigma around it, particularly if, you're educated, you have employment and things. There's so much stigma, and there's kind of this otherizing that it happens to other people and not to like in my family or things like that. So recognizing that it does happen, and that people are experiencing, people we know are definitely experiencing, because it's very, very, unfortunately, very prevalent. So just being that safe, non-judgmental person, I think, is very important. So and to be available when they're ready to talk about it, because sometimes kind of probing and asking may not help, but just kind of I think like familiarizing ourselves with the dynamics, kind of recognizing those signs, asking the right questions, because one thing we know is that like if you don't ask the right questions, you don't pose them in the right way, then you're gonna like kind of lose somebody. So just being watchful and helpful, I think, could be
And we have a question here from one of our viewers. What more do you wish you could do to help the victims of domestic violence or their families?
I mean, ultimately, and we've put this in our mission, ultimately I want it to stop, right? I've been at Apna Ghar for 17 years, and I've seen more and more cases every year. Like that's just not how I thought it would be 17 years ago, right? Like I thought it would become less, but the more outreach we do, the more available we are, the more people come to us, which is great, but it's also kind of pointing to the extent of the problem. So I think we're thinking about how we could be part of that solution too. So we're thinking about how what are ways to engage people who are causing the harm, and how to kind of provide services and support to them. Because one of the things we've learned is that you've heard this, but it's true. Hurt people, because a lot of the people that we see in our programs that have caused the harm are actually people who were abused as children. So so it's very cyclical, it's very generational, and that's why it's sort of prevalent too. And then certainly it's based in patriarchy and kind of the way that the systems work all over the world. So ultimately, I'd like for it to just not be an issue.
That would be the ideal situation.
Until then, we're just, we're trying to be more available in more places, in more different ways, in terms of our programming, in terms of our outreach and training. Kind kind of helping community members understand what's going on and the extent of the issue.
Right.
And doing as much advocacy as we can, right, with people who are the policymakers. Often they're not aware of the extent of the problem as well. So we're constantly out there. And then also making sure that it's something that they understand doesn't exist just in pockets or in certain communities. And because that's another way of sort of otherizing, because it's like, oh, that there's something about that culture that kind of creates this, but it's really not that. It's like different cultures may experience it differently, but it exists in all cultures.
On all cultures.
Yeah.
And in terms of like, so obviously we are a podcast that focuses sort of on like the South Asian diaspora. So do you have any statistics for us on like how, like what percentage of cases you see are from South Asian families, South Asian backgrounds versus, you know, just the general population, or even globally, you know, how much domestic violence, gender violence in South Asian communities exists?
So I think it exists at very high rates in South Asian communities, but I don't, like, the UN has put out statistics that show that it exists at those levels in most countries and most areas. So again, like, it may exist in different ways. It certainly exists across like sort of generations. So one of the things we do see in South Asian families is, even like, for example, in the US, because people, like, if people like, say, my age have kind of moved to the US and then brought their parents over, so there's abuse, like people my age are then like abusing their older parents.
Wow.
So we've seen some kind of all of this multi-generational stuff that has seemed particular to South Asian communities, but that's again just because of like our family structures and things like that. Again, not necessarily because there's something inherent about the culture or the level of patriarchy or level of inequality that causes it. But it is extremely prevalent.
Yeah. We have another question here. How worried are you about the safety of the people that you work with?
Very. I'm the executive director and I have to care about our staff. So yeah, we've just had to adapt to kind of working differently. It's been challenging for our staff. It's essentially like human services are very much like healthcare, and we are very much on the front lines, and we very much work in close proximity to the people we serve. So it's like, you know, we want to be available. Apna Ghar, you could, I talked about the crisis line, but we also, you know, we're available for anyone to walk in at any time. But like those things are not available right now.
Right.
So yeah, because we've got this hotel option, we actually don't have closed our shelter as well, because otherwise it would have been a congregate living situation that may have caused an unintended, but it could have caused the spread of the virus, and would have impacted our staff.
Yeah. And so have these the clients been moved from the shelters to the hotel now? Is that what?
Yeah, if they were larger families, because like I said, we also have the transitional housing apartments. So if they were larger families, we actually moved them into apartments, and our staff did an amazing job of moving them, of getting them set up, getting furniture, kind of just getting the whole thing set up, a new home for them. And then, yeah, if they're single or preferred to be in a hotel. And the hotels are also like the suites. So like there's a little kitchenette and things like that. So because like we realized it would be not just a couple of days, but like kind of a few, maybe even a few months.
Yeah.
But the idea is not to have them there all of the, like, throughout, even if this crisis carries on, is to kind of then move to apartments and other things that that they may want. Some people were able to kind of find family members and other ways in which maybe roommates or things that they felt comfortable with. But usually, yeah, we just sort of are doing our same programming, but just slightly differently. So usually people, if someone's in the shelter, they are going to go to another type of housing. So that's just kind of what we're following still.
That makes sense. We have another question here before we end, is how do you create awareness about your foundation?
So we do have an outreach and education program. We also provide training. So because we work with vulnerable populations, the state does require anyone who wants to volunteer with us, and certainly anyone who wants to volunteer directly with the program participants, to go through a 40-hour training. So we offer that, and all of that is now virtual. But typically, yeah, just kind of, that's why I'm here. So this is kind of what we do. We're constantly doing outreach to make sure that people know we're available, and also just how we're available, because I think it's important to build trust and to make sure that people know that we're a reliable place to go to. And so it's not really a marketing campaign. It's literally like outreach to ensure that people understand that we are available, what we offer, how we offer it. And hopefully that kind of helps them understand that we would be a trusted and reliable place to go to.
That's right. And your website is apnaghar.org, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I will post it in the comments, so if our listeners want to go, they can check it out there as well. Yeah. But we really appreciate you coming and talking to us, and I can vouch that I've actually worked with Apna Ghar from a legal perspective, and actually worked with some of the women who have used the services, and they rave about the help that they've gotten. It's been genuine help from the perspective of if they need a place to live or if they need food, like it's actually there. And I can attest to everything that Neha is saying today, that they actually do this, because I've worked from the legal perspective. But we really want to thank you for being here, and we appreciate the time that you've given us and the work that you do, and especially now, it's so important. And to all of our viewers, if you can help either financially or with your time, we've posted the website in the comments, apnaghar.org. Please do so. And we appreciate you being on, Neha. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.